this week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Okay, before we start, as you may well know, or you may not well know, if you live across the pond you probably will know, there is a rather important football match happening in Atlanta later on today, hence the t-shirt. Third Super Bowl in the row. Let's hope it's not as bloody disastrous as the last time they went to the Super Bowl. But anyway, we're obviously not here to talk about American football, we're here to talk about whiskey. And it's yet another episode of the show featuring some independently bottled whiskey from my good friends at Carn Mor. And the reason I'm doing this is because 3 of the last set of releases that they did in September, I thought, oh, they're just stunning, and I've just got to sort of share them with you guys. And you know how it is. I mean, I'm probably about 4 to 6 weeks, I guess, behind when I receive the sample and think, yeah, I really want to do an episode of the show on these, and it just takes absolutely forever to get to that point where I can sort of shoehorn them in. So basically what I've got is 3 bottlings that were released I think in and around September of last year, along with 3 other rather outstanding bottlings that Carn Mor have done. I haven't had the opportunity to share with you guys, and I just felt like over the last couple of weeks I've probably been slightly critical of some of the whiskies that I've tasted, so I thought it would be nice to do an episode of the show where I don't have to be critical. And all of these bottlings, I believe, if memory serves me correct, I have stocked at some period in time, so obviously you know that they're going to be what I consider to be great whiskies. Anyway, so obviously this is not the first episode of the show I've done on Carn Mor. 5 out of the 6 bottlings are in their celebration of the Cask range. 1 is in the Old Perth range of vatted malts that they do. So I guess we'll just take a look at today's lineup.
I like to go down here when I was a kid.
Okay, so first off we're going to kick off with a bit of old grain. As you know, I am quite fond of a bit of old grain. So this is an Invergordon. It was distilled in June of 1987, bottled in September of 2018, thus making it 30 years old, bottled at 51.5 from a single bourbon barrel, 902322. So it's always difficult when you've got all these different styles to sort of like go, right, when we're going to start, different ages, different alcohol levels, and ordinarily I don't tend to kick off with grains, but just this time round it seemed probably the apt thing to do. Right, the second bottling we'll be looking at is a Glenlossie. This was distilled in June of 1995, bottled in April of 2018, so 22 years old at 53.8, single bourbon barrel again, 1323, and I thought when I was given the samples or the list of the releases for that period of time, I thought, oh, Glenlossie, don't see an awful lot of that about these days, and certainly not to that sort of age. So I was quite looking forward to tasting that. Third bottling we'll be looking at is a Glen Grant, again from the celebration of the Cask range, distilled in April of 1996, bottled in February of 2017, so yes, a bit of an old one. Single bourbon hogshead, 67820. It's 20 years old and bottled at 55.3%. And again, it's like the Glenlossie, you just don't really see very much of it about in the independent sector. Certainly not if you think, well, I mean, 10 years ago, you know, there was a lot of independently bottled Glen Grant appearing, but sort of since then you just don't see it, and it's always nice to sort of kind of come back to a classic of its type, shall we say. So there you go, that's going to be a 20-year-old Glen Grant. Fourth bottling we'll be looking at is one of the newer releases, or should I say the newer releases. This was bottled in September again of 2018. This is a celebration of the Cask Pulteney. Distilled in May of 2007, so making it 11 years old. It's actually bottled in October of 2018, not September, and at a not inconsiderable alcohol content of 65.5%. I'll blow a few cobwebs away before lunch, I can tell you. Yeah, so it's a single bourbon barrel, 43561. Fifth bottling we'll be looking at is the Old Perth bottling. This is the limited release single sherry cask from 1996. It was bottled at some stage in 2008, I can't remember exactly when, at 55.2%. And I don't know what the components are. I can't remember if it's the Highland Park Macallan that they were bottling. It could well be, but my notes don't seem to sort of imply that. But anyway, we shall see what it's like. And finally, we're going to finish with a bit of peat, as is often the case. This is a Caol Ila, again bottled in the Celebration of the Cask range. It's 10 years old, so it's got to be bloody good. It was distilled in June of 2008, bottled in September of last year. A single bourbon hogshead, 311042, and bottled at the not inconsiderable ABV of 59.4%. So not quite as hefty as a Pulteney, but not exactly a shy and retiring bottling. But anyway. So that's the lineup for the show. Let's kick off with a bit of old grain then, shall we? Okay, so let's start with the Invergordon. Let's see what the nose gives us on this. Kind of classically Invergordon, quite light, aromatic, lots of fresh dried fruits. Not as oaky as some Invergordons that I've come across. In actual fact, the oak is quite well behaved. It's just sort of sitting in the background. I'm getting a bit of vanilla, a little bit of tannin. I mean, for 22, yes, this has got some. This is lovely and harmonious. It's not showing a huge amount of age, but it's not too young to be sort of like one-dimensional, if you see what I mean. It's just about sort of ready, shall we say. A little bit of earth, dunnage maybe. There's a almost not quite a salinity, but I'm guessing it's probably more from the alcohol that's just giving it that little bit of crispness. Which is kind of like just all adding to the balance. Just a fabulous nose, it really is. And it's just very elegant, it's delicate, it's not sort of, you know, imbalanced or unbalanced as the case may be, as some grains can be. Let's see what the palate's like. So it kicks off with quite a bit of oak in actual fact. So you get charred oak, coconut, a little bit of toffee, plenty of vanilla, lovely sweet vanilla, and then in comes the dried fruits. I'm getting the sort of the classic grainy dried fruits, a little bit of maturity, a little bit of oxidation, and again quite a fresh, almost saline like finish. It's got a really chewy finish. I mean, lovely progression. I really like that. Doesn't need any water at all. I just love how it starts with the oak, moves through into the grain character, and then really has a lovely palate cleansing finish. I mean, some people might find it a little bit austere, and yes, it is a little bit austere, but I like that. I like the sort of the palate cleansing feel right on the finish. And for me, that was a fabulous grain. Really very, very good.
Most of the things I forget. Most of the shit
Right,
I
okay,
forget.
so let's move on to the Glenlossie. Let's see what nose gives us on this. Do you know, that's got quite a bit of body for a Glenlossie. I mean, I often find, or have done in the past, that Glenlossie is more in the sort of Glen Mor kind of style of spey. It's the crisp, it's grassy, it's citric. But this has actually got some nice weight. I mean, admittedly, there's a little bit of buttery oak, which is kind of adding to that kind of weight. There's a touch of Turkish delight. So it's kind of, I mean, I often find with like I said, with Glenlossie, it can have a sort of a slightly Toshiny kind of lowlandy sort of edge to it, and I've often enjoyed Glenlossie because of that sort of almost kind of morphing of Speyside and lowland kind of character. But like I said, this has got a little bit more weight to it, a little bit more barley, a little bit more oak, but it's still lovely whiskey. I mean, really is. I mean, it's got so much complexity. Like I said, I mean, you've got these different elements coming together, and it's kind of, like I said, it's kind of sort of, yeah, hybrid kind of more weighty Speyside and lowland, and yeah, it's just a fabulous nose. Really fresh, touch of almost white flowers, sort of possibly hyacinth, that kind of thing, although not quite so pungent. The oak does start, give it a bit of time, and the oak is coming through a little bit more butteriness and creaminess, but the spirit's actually standing up to it pretty well, in actual fact. So yeah, there's a little bit of green fruit now as well, a little bit of almost kind of sort of green gagey kind of character. See what the pal's got. Lots of dusty, mature oak, but again, the spey character is kind of standing up to it really well. Lovely citrus note on the mid palate, a little bit of barley, touch of granite. Again, plenty of alcohol, but not too much alcohol to kind of freshen up the finish. Again, lovely progression, really well balanced. Quite a mouth-watering aftertaste again, with a little bit of Turkish delight and a little bit of barley. I mean, that is just fabulously balanced. I mean, okay, you might argue that it's initially a little bit heavy on the oak, but the spirit character really comes through on the middle. And although Glenlossie is a relatively delicate spey, like I said, this certainly has a little bit more weight to it, and has certainly stood up to the oak really, really nicely. And that oak, although on the nose didn't seem to quite show as much of the classic maturity and the sawdusty kind of character that it did on the palate, it's just absolutely delightful and really well balanced. So, oh, lovely. Right, okay, so let's move on to another spade. Let's move on to the Glen Grant. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Now, lovely nose, first off. Now, I kind of often sometimes equate whiskies to wine, and Glen Grant is always kind of classic, sort of forthright, sort of Bordeaux-y style, if you like. Always seems to me to have an amazing structure. And this has got a lovely sort of slightly tightness to it. It's kind of very upright. It's very sort of, you know, traditional, I guess is probably a good word. Yes, there's some lovely tannins. There's a touch of coffee. There's some barley. You can smell that mature oak just underneath. Again, it's really balanced. A touch of chocolate, milk chocolate. Little bit of herbal rye-like notes kind of coming through, obviously from the cask. I mean, it is a hoggy after all. So, but I just love the structure of this whiskey, and it just says kind of classic Glen Grant to me. And I can tell you the bottles didn't last that long on the shelf. It has to be said. That is just a fabulous whiskey. It's just got the lovely aromatic quality as well of the barley and the oak. Oh, fabulously balanced, absolutely fabulous. Let's see what the palate's like. Oh, that finish is gorgeous. Juicy tangerine, orange, lemon, a bit of oak kind of coming back on the aftertaste. Again, it's got a wonderfully structured palate. You can taste the slightly earthy, slightly gritty tannins. Obviously not quite as gritty as, say, something like Springbank, but it has, again, that structure, that very upright kind of feel to it. Which may sound like a stupid thing to say, but it's not an expansive whiskey. It's very kind of, not tight, but it's kind of within a sort of, you know, set parameter, if you like, I suppose. And you get this kind of like wonderful, slightly tannic, slightly coffeed barley, dried apple, bit of apricot, barley, coffee. I mean that's just, oh, it's just stunning, absolutely stunning. And you know, you don't see so much independently bottled Glen Grant around and these days, and it's just a joy to come across it again, because I remember sort of way back in the midst of time, when I first started in the whisky industry, tasting some fabulous old Glen Grant that was bottled by Duncan Taylor, I think it was, yes, back when I used to have a relationship with them, and just been absolutely blown away by it, and I've just always loved Glen Grant since, and oh, that was good. Right, okay, so let's move on to an alcoholic bit of Old Pulteney. Oh no, sorry, Pulteney, not Old Pulteney, that's their brand name. Pulteney is the distillery. So let's dive straight in and see what the nose gives us. Actually, considering it is 65%, it is remarkably restrained. I mean, within, you know, a limit, shall we say. I mean, it's got a tightness. Obviously, it's not a surprise given the ABV. But there's some rose petal mar, obviously, because it's pretty young. But it's some salt. There's some barley, some coastal notes. There's some earth, dunnage, manure. It's quite a visceral nose, it has to be said. And this was the one thing that I just loved about this, and I remember putting this on one of the tasting evenings. Oh, talking of the tasting evenings, Bruichladdich have now confirmed that they will be doing a tasting evening for us, which will be the September tasting evening. So it's up on the website, so get your tickets in, or get your booking in early, because that one's probably going to sell out fairly quickly. I mean, it's just intense. I mean, it's kind of tight alcoholic, but not too alcoholic. It's kind of, it needs a little drop of water, obviously. That goes without saying, but let's see what the palate's like. Not surprisingly, the finish is a bit masked, but whoa, that's intense. but it's not OTT alcohol wise. Yes, you can feel it. Yes, it masks the finish. Yes, it makes the mouth salivate, but it's still got a lovely kind of fleshiness. There's some white chocolate. There's a bit of rose petal mar from the youthful character of the spade. Loads of spice, a little bit of smoke. Stunning intensity, it has to be said. Lovely saltiness. I mean, it is just such a wakey dram, it has to be said. Seriously intense. Let's put a little drop of water with it. It's probably taken it down to somewhere around about 50%, I imagine. Let's see what the nose gives us now. Brought out the oak a little bit more. It's a little bit more creamy, milky. Touch more almost kind of dried grainy fruits, but which that's probably more down to the oak kind of coming through a little bit more. Quite earthy, you know, that seems to have emphasised the earthiness and the natural sort of slightly stinky sort of edge. I mean, this has just no end of character. I mean, it is just raw Pulteney, you know. It's like, wow, you know. It's just kind of like getting a glimpse into sort of things that you normally don't see, if you see what I mean, because, you know, you get the Pulteney 12-year-old, and it's got a, you know, a pleasant sort of windswept kind of coastal character, but it's got a polish to it. It's got a, you know, I mean, this is just, well, you could argue it's not ready for bottling, but, you know, it's just, ooh, you know. See what the power's like now. That's a wake-up one. Like I say, it seems to have kind of pushed the oak down, so you're getting a lot more of the spirit character. It's very young, it's very rose petally, it's intense, it's salty. It's kind of naked Pulteney, if you like, I suppose. And yeah, maybe I would have sat on this for a little bit longer, but I can see why it was bottled. And you know, how many independents are bottling Pulteney? Not very many, I can tell you, and certainly none apart from Carn Mor that I actually deal with. And oh, dribbling. Oh, I mean, that is intense. I mean, that is just stunning, it has to be said. I mean, yeah, alright, there's not a huge amount of complexity. You wouldn't kind of expect it from that kind of age Pulteney, it has to be said, but it's just sort of so raw and visceral, and yeah, okay, you can argue, well, it's only 1 year removed from the 12-year-old, which they do, and it's chalk and cheese, it has to be said. I mean, it tastes more like sort of half its age, shall we say. So this could have just carried on maturing for at least another 10 years, quite comfortably, I reckon. I mean, this would have probably been absolutely amazing, given it was bottled at 21 years of age, and bloody expensive as well. But, you know, even so, I mean, it's just lovely to have the opportunity to sort of see kind of old Pulteney without its pants on, so to speak, if you see what I mean. Okay, so let's move on to the Old Perth bottling. It's always nice to have a little bit of sherry, but let's see what the nose gives us on this then, shall we? Herbal, Oloroso, some lovely dried fruit, some oxidation, touch of syrup, coffee, chocolate. I mean, that's a lovely sherry cask, it has to be said. I'm not getting a great deal of kind of spirit character, but then I was never expecting it. I mean, there's no real sort of kind of smoke or peat or earth or anything like that. It is pretty much relatively mature sherry, you know. I mean, there is a touch of barley underneath it. I am getting a semblance of spirit character, although it is, you know, not going to sort of, it doesn't kind of lead me to any particular distillery. But in saying that, I think that the balance is pretty good, considering it is a single sherry cask. Yeah, a little bit of vanilla kind of coming through now. A lot of green herbal notes. I mean, it is what it is. There's no sulphur. It's very pleasant. And, you know, I bought it, you know. At the end of the day, being a retailer, I know that there are people that want to buy this kind of whiskey, and it might not be the sort of whiskey that sort of has me going in orgasmic raptures, but I know it's a good quality sherry matured whiskey, and so henceforth, if you are coming to the shop and you want to buy a sherry matured whiskey, you know, ignoring the Glenfarclas, it has to be said, you know that, you know, it's going to be at least non-sulphured. Certainly if it's an independent bottling and I've had the opportunity to taste it. Well, I wouldn't stick an independent sherry matured whiskey on the shelf without tasting it, goes without saying. Anyway, let's see what the par's like. Lovely mellow, dried fruits or raisins, sultanas, dried grape, fig. Quite dry Oloroso-y kind of character. It's got a herbalness, yes, but it's very dry. It's not the sort of treacly kind of Oloroso that you often get. Nice bite on the finish, a little bit of coffee, some spices, pepper. Quite full, very late hint of smoke. So yeah, overall, I mean, really pleasant. I mean, you know, I don't dislike sherried whiskies, and yeah, alright, you can argue there's very little spirit character there. It is pretty much all about the oak, but it's got a lovely maturity, and yeah, okay, every now and again I like to have a cigar and a sherry whiskey, or maybe an after dinner, that kind of thing. I mean, in actual fact, I was quite enjoying recently the Flora and Fauna Dalyuen 16-year-old, relatively heavy on the whiskey, but on the sherry, but quite nicely balanced and sort of quite meaty and kind of classically sort of old-fashioned Dalyuen as opposed to more modern style. But anyway, I digress. So yeah, I mean, that was really good quality, really very, very good, and if that's your cup of tea, then you would have just loved it. For me, it was a good quality, mature sherry cask whiskey. I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going to have orgasmic raptures over it, but, you know, praise where praise is due, as they say. So moving on to the final whiskey of this afternoon, or morning, as yes, it is still morning in actual fact. This is I'm recording this one a bit earlier, as to be said, but anyway, I got my chores out of the way yesterday. Anyway, let's see what the nose gives us on this then, shall we? Oh, that is lovely. It kind of straddles the old school and the new school Caol Ila. It's got a richness and a fatness, plenty of apricot, but there's also that crisp, salty, slightly white fruity pear, maybe apple. Some lovely peat, not too peaty, just about the right amount. It's got an earthiness. There's an aromatic character, certainly to the barley. Not much oak. Never seem to get a huge amount of oak with Caol Ila, which is not an issue. I mean, there's a bit in the background. It's kind of adding a little bit of balance, but it's you know, and I kind of don't like my Caol Ila with a huge amount of oak. It has to be said. I love the character of the spirit, and you know, refill American oak seems to be sort of like just quite apt for Caol Ila. There's a touch of coffee, maybe a little bit of sort of coffee chocolatey sort of thing, but oh, it's got a lovely intensity, it has to be said, and just really earthy, really natural, and certainly just really harmonious. Let's see what the power's like. Quite a chewy finish, it has to be said. Bit medicinal as well. That is lingering, that is lovely. I mean, it's quite full to start off with. You're sort of getting lots of sweet barley, bit of apricot, in comes the salt, dusty peat, a little bit of earth, alcohol. I mean, it's really kind of hitting the palate, but it really kind of clears away a lot of the richness, and then you're getting that sort of smoke lingering, citrus, like I said, touch of spice, and malt as well. I mean, that is just absolutely delightful. That is stunningly good. I mean, it's kind of, like I said, kind of classically sort of somewhere between old and new school Caol Ila. I mean, old school Caol Ila used to be, as far as I'm concerned, very fresh, very citric, very herbal, very intense, and it kind of started to get a bit fatter and a bit oilier, certainly the distillery 12-year-old anyway. And I've noticed that in independent bottlings you often get kind of like, you know, old school and new school versions of Caol Ila. And this kind of, like I said, this kind of straddles the two, if you like. I'm going to put a little drop of water with it and see what that does to it. So let's see what the nose is like now. It's showing up its youthfulness, it has to be said. There's a little bit of not quite fainty, but there's more impurities showing. But then there's some lovely sweet fruit, there's some apricot, there's some barley. I mean, it's young and intense, is where it's at, and the peat is still hanging on there, in actual fact. I mean, a lot of the time with the peated malts, you stick some water with them and the peat is kind of like, I'm off. But this is kind of sticking around, and nice. Let's see what the palate's like now. That's brought out the oak certainly on the beginning, so it's creamy, it's fresh, vanilla, getting a little, kind of clears away pretty quickly as the salt kind of kicks in. Less peat, more salt, more barley, more fleshy fruit certainly on the finish. It certainly feels more oily, more modern Caol Ila. But still got retains a little bit of an edge, a little bit of, you know, that kind of coastal edgy kind of not quite spicy, but yeah, salty kind of fresh mouth coating ending, and so absolutely lovely balance. And I think that's delightful either with or without water. I mean, obviously without water it's pretty intensely alcoholic. But it's one of those sort of whiskies that I think you could enjoy either with or without. So again, a lovely end. Okay, so let's wrap today's episode of the show. Firstly, a big thank you to Carn Mor for their continued support, for their sending of samples, and just being all round lovely people, it has to be said. Whenever I criticise their whiskies, taking it on the chin and probably thinking, oh, he's talking a load of bollocks, but we're not going to say anything. Yeah, all right, okay. It's always going to happen, isn't it? But by and large, I will say, and as I've said it on several occasions while doing these episodes of the show, Morrison and Mackay have just bottled some bloody good whiskey, and you know, I would suggest you buy it. You know, there are some great bottlings in both their Celebration of the Cask range and their strictly limited range, the 46% range. But anyway, we're not talking about that. We're talking about these ones tonight. So the Invergordon, yep, nothing wrong with that at all. Just about the right maturity. Bottled, you know, maybe a smidge to a young. It's all sort of like inches at the end of the day, I suppose, but still a really nice kind of a really nice Invergordon. The Glenlossie, yeah, beautiful, absolutely lovely, loads of character. I love the sort of the way it kind of merges classic Speyside with a bit of lowlandy kind of character, with a bit of oak. It's all just a lovely whiskey, it has to be said. The Glen Grant, I mean, just beautiful, absolutely lovely, just classic Glen Grant, really kind of four square, upright, kind of sort of like, you know, stiff upper lip kind of, yes, you know, sort of stuff. Nothing wrong with a bit of that at all, as far as I'm concerned. The Pulteney, yeah, well, that's a bit of a wild ride, it has to be said, and it went down really well at the tasting. As we said, a lot of people really liked it. Yes, all right, it's not got a huge amount of complexity. It's a bit, well, not one-dimensional, but it's a bit sort of, it is what it is, if you see what I mean. But whoa, that delivery, that intensity, it's just like, oh, damn, that's good. The Old Perth, yeah, I mean, if you like that style of whiskey, if you like the heavy sherried stuff, it's got a lovely cleanliness. There's some maturity, there's some complexity within the sort of the usual sort of oxidation, mature sherry, yada yada yada. Not a huge amount of spirit character, but again, you know, I liked it. It was okay. It was, you know, a whiskey that I would quite happily sell and, you know, quite happily drink. Although it's all gone now. And the Caol Ila, yeah. That was impressive. Really good Caol Ila, has to be said, and I can see why they bottled that in the Celebration of the Cask range. Lovely straddling of the two styles of Caol Ila, and just a bloody good whiskey all round if you love, you know, moderately peated whiskies. So yeah, I mean, I honestly can't praise Morrison and Mackay enough. They really do bottle some great stuff. But before they sort of go, yeah, they do bottle some crap as well. Just to bring you back down to earth, guys, there are some bottlings that are, but then again, that's no different to any other independent bottling company at all. So anyway, this is episode 299 in the bag. I know you guys are waiting for episode 300, and you will get it next week, and yes, it is going to be, I think, rather interesting. So until then, all that's left to say is, if you are an American football fan, watch the Super Bowl, root for the Patriots. They are the team, and before you say it, you only support them because they're winning. I was there in 1986. That's all that has to be said. So until next week, good dramming and good afternoon.